HQ presents The Lost Sister by Kathleen Mcgurl, read by Joan Walker. Chapter 1. Harriet, 2019. How she would ever thin down her possessions enough to allow a move into a much smaller property, Harriet had no idea. She wandered from room to room, touching ornaments, stroking the backs of armchairs, running her hand along polished tables and sideboards. Everything was infused with so many memories of her 70 years. The little Toby jug on the mantelpiece that had been her mother's, and she remembered loving as a child. The dining room table and chairs that she and John had saved up for in the early years of their marriage, determined to buy decent furniture that would last them a lifetime. The large, squishy sofa, much more modern, bought only about 10 years ago, and so comfortable and perfect for stretching out on when reading a book. It would never fit in the kind of two-bedroom bungalow her daughter Sally thought she should buy. Neither would the dining table. But how would she ever part with them? And all this stuff was just downstairs. Upstairs, she had 4 bedrooms and a study filled with more stuff. And then there was the attic, huge and filled with endless boxes of who knew what. That's what they were due to start tackling today, the attic. Sally had suggested it when she'd phoned the previous evening. "I'll go up there with you, Mum, and we'll just do it bit by bit. Once we get started, you'll find it easier, but I know how daunting it must feel." "Are you sure you can spare the time, love?" Harriet had asked. "What about Jerome?" "He's doing well today. He's in school, and he should be well enough to go to school tomorrow, so I'll have time. See you around 10. Get some chocolate croissants in for me from McKinley's bakery, will you?" "Sure, of course, love," Harriet had replied. And now the croissants were warming in the oven, the coffee was made, and at any moment Sally would arrive, and they'd have to get started on the attic, going through the 40 years' worth of junk and memories that was stored up there. Outside it was a blustery March day, raining on and off. The perfect day to tackle an indoor job, even one that was likely to be difficult and emotional. The doorbell rang and Harriet rushed to answer it, smiling as she greeted her eldest daughter, the one who'd stayed living close to her home in Bournemouth, the one she saw every week, who'd supported her when John died so suddenly and throughout the 9 long months since, as Harriet adjusted to life without him. And all this even though Sally had so many troubles of her own. She gathered her daughter into a hug and kissed her cheek. "Hello, darling. Thank you so much for coming round to help." "No problem, Mum. If I'm honest, it's good to have a few days when I'm not just looking after Jerome. Did you get those croissants in?" "Of course, I was outside McKinley's before it had even opened. We'll have coffee and pastries first, before going up into that hideous attic." Harriet gave a fake shudder at what was ahead, and Sally laughed. "You know what? I reckon you'll quite enjoy it once we get started, Mum. It's quite cathartic, throwing out rubbish." Harriet nodded and poured out the coffee. It wasn't the rubbish she was worried about finding up there. It was the memories. "I'm sure it is. Anyway, sit you down and tell me, how's my little grandson?" "On good form." Sally took a mouthful of warm pastry and had to immediately reach for a paper napkin Harriet had piled on the table to mop up some escaped chocolate from the corner of her mouth. "Wow, these are as excellent as ever. He's at a point in his treatment cycle when he has more energy than usual, enough to do a few days in school. I'm so glad. A bit of normality for him, a chance to play with his friends, and for me a chance to do something else other than constantly change the DVDs while he lies on the sofa." Poor little mite. Is the chemotherapy working? 6-year-old Jerome had been diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia a couple of months earlier. It had knocked them all for 6. It just seemed so unfair. "I'm really, really hoping so, Mum." Harriet glanced at her daughter. Sally's voice had cracked a little, and there was a telltale glistening in her eyes. Time to change the subject, then. She knew that Sally hated showing how vulnerable she was and found it hard to talk about Jerome's illness. Even in the early days when he'd just been diagnosed, she'd struggled to put into words what the consultant had told her. Half the point of today was to give Sally a chance to take her mind off Jerome for a few hours.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?